Hi, so I'm Scharf, and today I'll be talking about our Minka journey. And it actually was a complete accident. On my 50th birthday, a friend sent me this photo and said, you need to go and see this beautiful house. So my husband and I tracked it down. We did fall in love with it, because look at it. We went through all the processes to start buying it, and then in the 11th hour it turned out that the woman who was handling it all was the wife, and it was her husband, of course, who had the final decision, and he did not want to sell. So everything fell apart. We were devastated, but our real estate agent promised us that she would find us another one, and it took a few months, but eventually she called us up and she said, okay, it's your lucky day. I have found it for you. This was the inside of that house. You can see how beautiful it is. But she called us up and she said, I think I found the perfect one. It's quite different from the other one. Here it is. So it's a traditional Azumadachi style, which is that big wide front. From the outside it looks a lot bigger than it actually is. For a Kominka it actually is not that huge, but it's hard to tell people that when they look at it from here. It also came with the Naya, which is the barn on the right. Here are the stats on it. So you can see the footprint is 165 meters squared, which is I think around 1,700 square feet, and then there's an additional 50 feet in the back. And then the land is almost 1,000 square meters, which, I don't know, a third of an acre or something like that, but it's got land all around it also that is available to us to use. So it feels like we have a ton of land, which is great. It was built in Meiji 40, which is 1907. So the best way to show it to you is, this is a video I took right after we bought it. And it's just a walkthrough, it's about 2 minutes. So they had cleaned out most of their things, and this is what we found after we'd signed off on everything. So everything was tatami. The entire thing was tatami and then covered with these thin tatami mats to protect the tatami. Sliding doors on all 4 sides. So more light than most Minka have, but still a wee bit dim. This is the only proper window in the living room. It was really these beams that we fell madly in love with. Just gorgeous. All the walls were just the natural clay, tsuchikabe they call it, the clay walls, just in the natural color, so kind of muddy. These doors were added later, so a lot of veneer and plastic, which we were not fond of. They had 3 small rooms along the back, so the one big living room and then these 3 much smaller rooms, all separated by fusuma, the sliding doors. And then an engawa, that's the narrow hallway along the front. And then the glass doors all along the front, which are lovely and let in a lot of light, but they're the traditional kind of doors where they fit tightly together. And if you want to open them, at the far end on the outside there's a wooden box, and you have to kind of slide each door into the box. So it's not super convenient, and if we have a windfall, we will someday probably try to replace them with similar looking wooden doors, but are on alternating tracks so that they're easier to open and close and we can easily put screens in. That was the Butsudan, the Buddhist altar behind those doors on the right, and the Tokonoma, the decorative altar on the left. And looking back through to the Genkan there. So it was a high ceiling in the living room. These ceilings are really lovely, actually. It's sort of a dark wood slats. Again, everything was the same kind of muddy color. And this whole section was added much later, we think in the 60s. I think it had been opened originally, an open engawa, but they closed it in so you can see metal sliding doors rather than wood. And that leads to the other 2 rooms. This is where the washing machine is and the sink. Pretty rustic, and the gorgeous bath with its 17 different kinds of tile. Functional, but certainly not beautiful. So a lot to work with there. This is the only room that had a dormer window, I guess, to help keep you warm in your freezing bathroom. And yeah, love that floor tile. And then last but not least is the toilet. So, wow, this is a little dizzy. So a simple drop toilet, and it was partitioned. So on this side was the drop toilet. On the other side of that partition was a urinal that could only be accessed from outside. So if you were outside doing work, you could come in and pee without taking off your shoes if you were a man. that was the old kitchen back there that you saw briefly. They added that in the 60s too. This was the original ceiling in the living room, so it was the bamboo, and because there had been an irori, an open hearth on the floor, everything was blackened. And as much as we really loved this old bamboo ceiling, it was just so filthy. So we were up there scrubbing and trying to clean the bamboo as best we could, but ultimately 100 years of smoke and creosote, and we eventually realized we were going to have to remove it, which was sad and also a huge job. It was in panels, so we'd pull up the panels and drop them through to this giant game of pick-up sticks in our living room. But we did preserve all of it, and a friend of ours who's a bamboo artist took a lot of it, because it's quite prized to make bamboo. This is what was left after we took it out. You can see how insanely filthy it was up there. 2 inches of dirt and creosote and guano. So it took a while to get all that clean, but we did eventually, and then we decided just to go with the simple reed mats. This is not really what they're intended for, but it works pretty well. It simulates the look of the bamboo ceiling, and it's a lighter color, so again, anything to bring more light into the room. We then covered it with this thick, semi-organic insulation that we had ordered originally because we were told it was translucent. It's not, but it made great insulation. And then above the bedrooms, where it's a lower ceiling, it was a drop ceiling, and we just put in the traditional fiberglass insulation. It was kind of fun to get that in there. Okay, so iroris are the original traditional Japanese hearths, and the one on the left is the old one. That was in the original house. The one on the right added later. We love the look of them, but ultimately we want to live in this house, and it just wasn't practical. It was in a fairly inconvenient space in the living room, and we decided to let it go. We then tore up all the tatami and all of the subflooring to get to the joists. And that's, on the left there is my friend from Alaska who came to help us, Kyra, thank you, and my husband. And the city had very generously given us an additional 1 million yen, about $10,000, towards the renovation. But among the list of requirements we had to meet was termite spray. This is what you see when you look under a Minka. You see big posts sitting on big rocks, dozens of them, and it's a little disconcerting the first time to think your big heavy house is sitting on a rock. But actually it works out really well. It's stable and it's flexible. We have earthquakes. It's stood there. So yeah, so here's the spraying for the termites, but I didn't want all that chemical toxicity in my house, so I went online and found a recipe for an organic borax and dish soap and a couple other ingredients, and sprayed everything, and had to send this picture to the city, and they had to sign off on it. They were quite strict. Next came the black paper, so a vapor barrier. Some people lay it right on the ground, but my husband said he thinks it works better to let the airflow stay on the ground, so he did it on top of the joists. It's a 15-pound paper, so that covered all the floors throughout the house. And then next was plywood, back when you could afford plywood. Hoping those days come back again. I think it's tripled in price since we bought it. So the whole house got the black paper, and then I got the plywood. And then on top of that, we're going to put in tongue and groove flooring. And we really wanted the traditional Minka look of the really wide boards, but just can't find them. You could get them used, but it would have been just prohibitively expensive. So right up the road from us on the Noto Peninsula was a little lumber mill. This is local wood. It's a kind of cypress. We got the widest boards we could get, which were alternating, I think 4 inch and 6 inch. Insulated the entire floor, and you could feel the difference immediately. It was quite remarkable. And then right on top of that, we put in the tongue and groove flooring. It was a big job, but it went down nicely. And the guy was great. Like, dealing with locals was great. He gave us all this extra stuff. So this is it, all down, looking beautiful. And then we promptly covered it up with thick paper for the next 4 years. And this is the one irori that we kept, a very tiny irori in the engawa that could be used for some boiling water or something, maybe a very tiny kotatsu. But we covered it all up, and then it was time to tackle the kitchen. The kitchen had a drop ceiling. We knew something would be beautiful above it, so we pulled down the drop ceiling, and we found this. More gorgeous beams, more beautiful bamboo. Once again, we had to remove the bamboo. And also our kitchen was a wee bit dark. So we replaced the bamboo with leftover flooring, so that's the same tongue and groove, all 4-inch. It's a nice light color, and it really sets off the beams, which took a lot of scrubbing, but they got scrubbed and they looked pretty good. And then, let's see, oh, we also added a skylight to the kitchen, so that had just been a roof all the way across. But again, our whole goal was to do things not only affordably, but also creatively, thinking outside the box and trying to find workarounds. So rather than spending the money on getting a fitted skylight put in, my husband decided he could make his own, which he did with 2 layers of clear corrugated sheeting and then very thick bubble wrap, several layers of bubble wrap in between. And we did that over 4 years ago now, and it's great. It's still no leaks, it insulates, and it lets in so much light. He added 1 simple window as well. Just works on a pull cord. We still need to get a screen in there. It's definitely wasp central in the summer. The kitchen floor, though, we thought many things what to do, but ultimately these were the boards that were the subfloor under the tatami mats. And of the whole house, probably 500 of these boards, maybe 100 of them were usable. So he sized each one, he measured and shaved and planed each one and got enough to do the kitchen floor, put them down with round head nails. And it looks really, I mean, it is authentic and it feels authentic, but what's interesting is that the boards were under the tatami for over 100 years, perfectly happy. Now that they're exposed to air and light, they're starting to shrink a little bit. So from when this picture was taken about 3 or 4 years ago, we have more noticeable gaps between them now. Yeah. The one really different thing we did in the kitchen was for the upper walls, which again were all the clay walls and very crumbly and very old, was to cover them with silver corrugated tin. And when my husband first suggested it, I will admit I was a little skeptical. But I gave in, you know, choose your battles, and now I love it. It lets in so much light. It reflects, even in the darkest winter days. The kitchen is full of light. It's so easy to clean, and I like the contrast. I like the mixed media feeling of new and old. The rest of the kitchen is fairly traditional. So we haven't done a lot with the outside, but one thing we did do was remove the tiles on this low roof, remove that roof, and raise everything up a couple of feet and bring a roof out so that we'll have more of a back deck in the future. And then also adding several windows. So here you can see it raised up, and he went on to then build windows for that space. So that space where you see those windows is actually a kind of mezzanine space. It's half the living room is the full height and half the living room is this. So except for that beam, I can just stand in there. It's just over me. So maybe, I don't know, 180 centimeters. The beam, however, is right here. So we have to be very careful when we're up there. I can't tell you the number of times we have whacked our heads on that beam. So we will eventually maybe round it off and paint it fuchsia. But in the meantime, this room gets so warm in the winter, it's amazing because it's right above the wood stove. In the summer, when those windows are open, there'll be an amazing breeze. We inherited a bunch of those chests you can just see under there, so we put them on wheels and they slide right in there perfectly, so they're great for storage. We'll eventually probably maybe put some tatami, make a bed, a place to just read and relax. Our cats already love it up there because of the heat. This room is not much advanced from where you see it in these pictures. One thing we did also do is remove the wall from that section, and that's our living room through there. So in the spring and the summer, it allows wind to come through, cool air to come through, and in the winter, it just helps circulate the hot air. There's also a trap door at the end that goes up to our real attic, which is what you saw at the beginning that we were cleaning and laying things in. So there, so you can see he's in the process of removing the stucco just to expose the grid. So it's kind of a cool design feature. It's also like people build straw bale houses and they always leave a little peephole so you can see their house is made of straw. This kind of gives you a peek of what's behind the stucco, which again you can see is still mud brown. Also, when it's lit from behind, it casts really cool shadows on the beam. So that's kind of another little feature. So here it is with the new ceiling, and then re-stuccoed everything off-white, so much lighter, much brighter. Anything to lighten things up, as you know, these Minka can be a little bit dark. And then, let me think. Next, again, was stuccoing. So this will become the bedroom, so we wanted to go with a nice happy color, so we went with a sort of sage green. And this is the point where I was taught how to do the stuccoing because there were so many jobs. So Patrick's a master stuccoer, and he showed me the basics, so I took over from there. And you know, if you don't look too closely, it's not too bad. It was fun. We used a mixture of pre-bought stucco already dyed and things we mixed up ourselves and added dye to. And then the shoji here is still paper, but eventually we replaced all of the paper with thin sheets of lightly corrugated translucent plastic. We did that because we have 4 cats, but we also did it for insulation, so it works pretty well for that. This is our washutsu, our Japanese room and / guest room, and Kanazawa is famous for this really vibrant blue, like an aquamarine blue, and I wanted that color so badly, but after buying several $100s worth of the dye to get to that color and still only getting to that, I gave up. So now it's that color blue. So again, here's looking, you saw at the beginning, on the right side with the doors was the Buddhist altar, the left was the decorative altar. It is now my closet. So lined it with cedar, and it holds all of my clothes pretty much. It's great. Rods and shelves, and this is it in its early days. And then on the right side, on the wall that used to have the butsudan, Patrick finally gave me my dream of having a round window. So again, why buy a round window when you can buy a coffee table at a second-hand store and just take the glass top off of it, and you can create your own round window. We found the shoji at a little second-hand store. They fit perfectly. And then I used washi paper, Japanese paper, on the back, just to give it a little more design feature, and have stuck the bamboo in there. What you see through there is a Japanese maple, which we've transplanted. So that's what you look at. And behind it, it wasn't planted yet, but there's now a weeping cherry. So 2 things to look at that window. And then a bamboo forest is what's behind our house. So here's kind of the finished thing. Another trunk holds all of our bedding and things. Those were the doors that were in front of the butsudan, are now in front of the closet. Need a little repair, but we'll get to that at some point. What else? Let's see, I think the bedroom floor is what we talk about next. Yeah, the bedroom floor, again, I wanted the same look as the kitchen, but we didn't have enough boards, so we got 3/4 inch plywood and cut out boards, and then he laid them the same way using the round head screws. So the final result, and it looks a lot like our kitchen floor, except it's stained plywood. But it works pretty well. You don't see very much of it. Here it is, before the bed, the rug, the dresser. Later in the video, you'll see it pretty much covered. And these are the sliding doors that are between bedroom and the Japanese room, the guest room. And I wanted to insulate them both for warmth, but also for sound. So I got this giant roll of 1/2 inch felt and cut out all the little gray squares, which are not all the same size. Put them in, and then I was planning to cover it with washi or something interesting, but my husband came in and said, "Wow, that looks really cool, you should leave it like that." So I said, "Oh, okay." So we put all the doors in, and then the little gray squares started to fall out, some of them. So we ended up covering them with like maybe 1 millimeter thick plastic. So in this photo, it looks very Dali-esque. It's very wobbly, but when you're actually in the room, they just look clear. So you really see the gray. But great insulation value and definitely a design touch. Somebody gave us that curving piece of wood, so Pat made the bed just a little bit off the ground, maybe 12 inches off the ground, and lots of air. We just have a mattress on top of that. So I keep talking about washi, and this is why. I visited the Awagami paper factory in Tokushima last year, and I was researching it for one of my clients, but I spent maybe an hour and a half in the gift shop, and this is just part of what I got. But I wanted to use it wherever I could use it. So again, this is the Japanese room / guest room. Behind that is the bedroom, so it's the back of those gray squares. Just a stripe of the green. And then across from that, so this is actually you're facing the engawa, you're facing outside. I was planning to use it again, but when I took off the original paper, I found all this Japanese writing. And they had lined the doors with calligraphy practice paper, and there's some accounting registers down there, there's some personal letters, there's a real mix of things. So we decided just to leave it because it's kind of cool. Japanese friends come over and are a little confused, but and then on the other side, this is not the position where they ultimately are. They are facing the outdoors, is where I really got to use all that paper, because as you come down our driveway, you look through our glass doors, this is what you see. So it's kind of bright and welcoming to have that there. So on the other side of that is the writing. The last project I did using that paper was to tear the different ones into shreds, and then I made up a mixture of the glue that you use, the liquid glue to put on shoji paper, and warm water, like a paper mache, essentially, and put it onto the backing of the sliding door and squinched it and let it dry, and just repeated that over and over and over again on 2 different doors. I had a kind of idea what I wanted it to look like, and in the end, when it was all done, covered everything again with another layer of the glue, and this was the final result. So, you know, it's definitely folk art, and I'm not really an artist, but it was fun to do, and they're another kind of design feature using local materials. On the right you see our wood stove, which is the soul of the house in the winter. And many of you in this room, I think, have wood stoves or want wood stoves, and you've discovered that in Japan they can be prohibitively expensive. We've heard stories from many friends spending anywhere from 1 to 2 million yen, $10,000 to $20,000 between buying the stove and getting all of the parts and having it installed and delivery, and again, not really in the cards for us. So we started researching used stoves, and we eventually found a little engineering shop about 2 hours south of us where he makes pellet stoves, and when he puts in a pellet stove, he often takes out a wood stove, and he had 2 or 3 in his warehouse. So we called him up and went down there to visit him, and we found this beauty. It's a Dutch West, American-made brand, and he sold it to us basically as is, which was almost new, plus all of the chimney and everything else you need for the stove, plus he delivered it 2 hours to our house for about 180,000 yen, so around $1,800 at the time. So we were very happy about that, and then my husband installed it. I mean, again, it's really helpful having a husband who does everything. And it's amazing. It heats, pretty much, it definitely will heat the entire downstairs area. Keeps the house at a comfortable 20 degrees, about 70, 72 degrees, which is fine, especially after 14 years in Alaska. That was very toasty to us. Behind it you see steel. So again, wanted to do something different, but also something that would help radiate the heat. So that's working really well too. So now back to the beautiful bathroom. As tempting as it was to live with that tile, we decided to not. So again, we got lucky. Patrick's main thing, in addition to doing everything else, but for most of his professional career, he was a tile contractor. And he had done a job for a friend, just to help a friend out. And in the process of that, he had met a local tile contractor in Kanazawa. So he remembered the guy. It was several years later, but we went by to see him. And the guy's like, "Oh, I'm retiring, and I have this warehouse full of tiles. So go in there and see if you find anything you like. It's all my leftovers. Help yourself." So we went through box after box after box after box and found these gorgeous Italian, half-inch thick travertine tiles, and 2 different sizes, and exactly enough to do the whole bathroom. I think we had 1 piece left over. He also gave me a huge box of mixed mosaic tiles. So after Patrick finished with the walls, I was let loose in there with the mosaic tiles, and because we decided to keep the blue tub because it was really cool and in good shape, and a lot of the tile was blue and green, decided to do a kind of nautical theme. So here you have some waving kelp and some jellyfish and a wee fish. On the floor there, instead of tile, because we couldn't heat under the floor, and it is cold in there, we didn't want freezing feet. So these are deck tiles. They come in 12-inch squares, and they snap together, and that's what we use for the floor. So that worked great. Here's my octopus. So this is who you look at when you're taking a shower. He makes me happy. Anyway. The only other outside thing we did, and this was way back at the beginning, several years ago, was the north side of the house looked like this when we got it. So we decided to clean that up a little bit. So it started with replacing the window frames, and then stuccoing And again, this is the first stuccoing the house got outside. We stuccoed that whole wall, restained all of the window frames, and that's pretty much how it looks now. A little bit dirtier, but definite improvement. And the outside is, yeah, what it is. And then, let's see. This was pretty much how the living room looked for the last 2 years until we moved in. So you can see the floor is all covered with thick paper. We had hung a few bits of artwork, but mostly it was our workspace. You can see my squash drying there in the sun. So we needed a way to get up to that mezzanine level, and we had thought about different staircases, but we also realized we need storage. And the best way to combine those two is something the Japanese have done beautifully for centuries, and something called a kaidan tansu, basically a staircase dresser. So we had started looking for them, and either we couldn't find one that was the right size, or we found it, but it was insanely expensive. Ultimately, Pat just decided to build his own, and at the same time, he built some built-in bookshelves. So if you remember from the original video, those were 3 small rooms behind there. So now where the full bookshelf is, on the other side is that staircase. We left the middle open. On the left side, we built a half staircase so we can have airflow coming through. In the background, you see a gas stove, or it's a kerosene stove. That's our backup to the fireplace, and it also keeps the house at sort of a constant temperature when the wood stove isn't running. So nice to have. These eventually became the doors at the bottom of the full built-in bookcase. Just some random sheets of aluminum we found in the garbage, and Patrick ran the sander over them and got some pattern on them. We'll eventually drill little holes for your fingers so you can open them. So we finally took up the paper from the floor, the staircase was built, everything's built in, and the next step was starting to stain everything. And that was going to be quite a big job. Started with the bookcases. The idea was to get as close to traditional Minka floors as possible, and they tend to be very dark. Also for passive heating in the winter, they soak up the sun. So started with those, and then that we started on the floor. I should say, wait, this was all me. He builds things and I paint them. So ended up mixing, I think, 3 different colors of stain to get what I wanted, which was not black but close. And it all went on with a sort of long-handled sponge. And it was challenging. We also had found those doors in the back. Were also secondhand doors that now lead to that back porch area. So yeah, here's the stain going on. It took 2 coats. About 5 days apart, and I was doing this, I think it was a little late in the year, so maybe February or March, so still kind of cold and damp, so it took a while for it to dry between coats. We were blasting the heat. We were not living here at this point, so eventually got the 2 coats on, then a coat of semi-matte, not pure gloss, not pure matte, to cover everything, and this is the finished result. So. And in the years of the wood floors being down but being covered, they got chipped and stepped on and scratched and banged up, so it helped make it look a little used. The last thing we did in the living room, these are those doors along the front, and I didn't want pure shoji because I wanted to be able to see out. So there's a beautiful garden outside, plus the light issue. So the compromise was to do washi as a border, and then again the thin, I think this time 2 mil thick, flexible plastic on the back. So it gave us windows, and actually, you can't see here, but it almost looks like Taisho glass, which is the last century glass, hand-blown glass. So it gives it kind of a cool wobble. And here you can see it from the back side, so full sheets. So again, insulation as well as transparency. And the last of the stuccoing in this Engawa was a kind of Tuscan gold color. This is something else a little unusual we did, because the Japanese room, we had to remove all of the original tatami, and we were trying to decide if we wanted to buy new tatami or do something a little different, and a friend said he was removing his tatami, barely used, did we want it? So yes, of course we did, but it didn't quite fit. Tatami is not standard sized, so in the end we ended up with a perfect border, but the last 2 pieces would not fit. So then Pat remembered we had bought these underfloor heating mats back from the States and hadn't used them for anything. So he put them there, and you cement over them, and then we put these 60 centimeter square slate tiles on top of it. And we had initially hoped that it would generate enough heat to actually heat the room. It doesn't heat the room, but it really heats the floor. Our cats love it, and it makes a great base for futons for guests. Keeps them really warm. The Genkan is not done yet, but one thing it does have now is its official stone. And this was the house we'd been renting in Kanazawa. It got torn down, and we drove by the day after it was torn down, and all that was sitting there was this stone. So we asked the guys tearing it down if we could have it, and they checked and said, you can. If you can move it, you can have it. So it's a hell of a job getting it there. It looks innocuous, but it must weigh 500 pounds. Eventually we'll fill the Genkan floor with probably small black river stones and do a pattern. These doors, you probably don't remember from the original video, were shiny fake veneer tigerwood maple plastic hideousness. These doors, secondhand store, once again, you would think they came with the house. They fit so perfectly. And they are now a closet in the living room for all of our jackets and whatnot, storage. The last thing we did before we moved in, because we do have these 4 cats, is build a catio. So under that new roof you put in, just chicken wired it all in, put in some framing. So their litter boxes are out there, they can sit outside and look at nature. So as to the outside, the original owners did a beautiful job with gardening. So there's flowers. Every month we get a new flower around the side of the house. Then the new wing has its own small garden. But the property, those of you who have been down this road know that Japan designates property with different things. So you can have residential or agricultural or forestry. Ours has 3 different designations, and one of them was agricultural, and you have to be a farmer to own agricultural land. So we were told, if you pay us some money and sign some papers and you use your land for storage, it'll be okay. So a helpful city person showed up with a big truck one day and unloaded all the stuff onto our property and said, see, now you have storage, so you're safe. So for about 3 or 4 years, this stuff sat there until COVID, basically. And when COVID happened, I suddenly didn't have a job. I had a lot of time on my hands. So I decided it was time to start gardening. So as of spring of 2020, this is what the land looks like now. Lots of garden beds and one of our first firewood storages back there. And I have become obsessed with gardening in these last 2 years. Definitely a learning thing. Thank God for YouTube and friends who know what they're doing. But it's been really fun, and we no longer are in violation of living on agricultural land, so there's that. Even the upper meadow to the left of the house turned out to be a great place to grow squash because it can sprawl all over the place. So that's been really fun too. I think that's just about it. Oh right, so I ended with a video that follows the same path as the first video. So coming in the Genkan, now you come into our kitchen, so you can see the floor. Everything you see in this kitchen was either secondhand, or if we bought it new, we did something to it. So like these countertops both came from Costco. They were hideous dark brown shiny veneer, so stripped everything down, painted it, sanded it. Very small fridge, because we don't want a big fridge. Bar stools came from an office supply secondhand store, 2 of our cats. The stove was new, but 50% off at a kitchen supply shop. Little cubby for appliances. The pots and pans hang up there, tea and coffee. Through there then, what used to be the old kitchen became our pantry. So on the left, what looks like a chest freezer is actually an old style rice cooler, and it's the same temperature as a fridge, and that's where I keep all the veggies and all the produce. All those drawers we found secondhand. Yeah, pretty much everything secondhand or built in. Hot water heater there. And then going into the bathroom, so that got a new coat of paint. I did keep the original sink for now, but added lots of storage above. And then you saw this earlier, but now it had, you can see it with the border, the floor completely in. Painted that bit yellow again, just to add some more brightness. We spend a lot of time in the bath, so we put a table. I work in there quite a lot. Found fishing floats that we found since we've been there. Heater, which we need in the winter. And then the toilet stayed, we opened it up, we took out the wall, and we covered it with burlap and painted it bright yellow, put it in a shelf for storage. It's a compost toilet. I don't know if we will stay permanently on compost, but it works for now. It's really easy. that will eventually hold water, and there's the urinal. So it got some use after all. And then heading into the living room. So basically the only new furniture in this house is that sofa, which we had made. It's a replica of a really gorgeous sofa that we could not afford, but we found a team in Hong Kong that would make a replica. Art we've picked up at secondhand stores. The fans are new, and they're so necessary. In the winter, they push the heat down. In the summer, they keep us cool. We do have a television, but mostly it sits under a kimono unless we're streaming something. There are the doors in the closet again, but the chairs, the table, the stool, I mean, all this great mid-century stuff that I love all came from secondhand stores. It's amazing what you find if you're patient. Lots of books now, lots of art. Going into the Engawa, which is basically the cat's territory because it gets sun. So what that white cat is sitting on is actually a fold-down table on wheels, so we don't have a dining room, but we wheel that out and we set it when we have people over for dinner. Some more found objects. We keep finding these sheep at secondhand stores. We found this amazing, the refill chair, if you're a design person. That was just fabulous, finding that chair. So yeah, it just kind of all came together bit by bit, without much plan. So the guest room now, when we have people in the winter, we just lay the futon right over that. It's nice and toasty. When we don't, we throw a blanket over that framework thing, and the cats use it like a kotatsu. The photography are all friends who are photographers, so we are telling anyone, send us photos, and we'll put them up in our guest room gallery. This is a local Oji-san who takes photos of the local temple. That folding screen also, secondhand antique shop, 100 cranes. I know it looks a little cluttered and junky in this video, but when you're actually standing there, it kind of works. We also, this winter, is our first winter there, we added all these curtains. So around the entire perimeter there are curtains now. We can close off different sections of the house, depending on what we're heating, which is really nice. Here's the catio from the inside. Another cat perch. We live in this house, and our cats live in this house, and we wanted it to be a place they enjoyed. So anywhere we could put scratching posts or cushions, so the cats could be comfortable. We just picked up these chairs just about a month ago. We're not really done with this area yet. I don't know, they're a little too big for the space, but they are comfortable. We have breakfast here in the mornings. The wood stove runs all day and keeps it warm overnight, so in the mornings it's still warm there. A great place to dry our laundry in the winter. So cluttered but cozy space. And then the bedroom, rug again, secondhand store. We added those screens, actually. We thought we'd just use it in the summer to have airflow come through, but then we left them there. A few more tears in the doors. I really have to get to those. But the around window, scarf collection, secondhand dresser. And I think that's just about it. This is one last view of the doors, and yeah, that's it. For some reason this video will end with that picture, and I don't know why. But that's it. So basically it was a lot of work and a lot of ingenuity, and people have been asking us how much we've spent. So the original house we paid 4.5 million yen, which is about $445,000 US at the time. The city immediately gave us back 10,000 towards the renovations, and I think conservatively we probably spent another maybe 2 million on everything else. Since we did all the work ourselves, we didn't pay for any labor but materials and the furniture and things like that. I'd say the renovations now are about 75% done, but we still have the whole back section we need to do. We need to redo all the electricity. So we have a little ways to go, but we're almost there. And if you're ever in the Noto Peninsula, come and see us. Thank you.